Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm a co-chair of the nonprofit Safe Silver Spring. We're joined on the call this evening with some of our board members, Amy Henchy, our treasurer. I'm Danielle Terlong, Yudi Rodriguez, Jacob Newman, Daniel Karoma. Thank all the board members for joining us. This evening, we're going to have a conversation with the representatives of the Montgomery County Police Department 3rd District, led by Commander David McBain. He's joined by his lieutenants, David Reed, Sunyoung Kim, and Lisa Engestrom. And usually we go around the horn and let everybody introduce themselves, but in the interest of time, we're going to just jump right into this program and ask Commander McBain to introduce us to important issues of public safety that have developed around Silver Spring over the course of the last weeks and months. Commander McBain has joined us before, and he's been very helpful in getting us information about questions that we have. So without further ado, Commander McBain, please take it away.
Thank you, Alan. And listen, before I get started, I want to just give you a little bit of a shout out. I've been here since March and kind of thrown into the fire, and you were one of the first guys that reached out to me, and you were very quickly an advocate, and I've used you to help me get a message out a time or two. Sometimes it's hard to reach people and get a message out of what I'm doing in the community, and you seem to have your fingers in a lot of different networks, and I really appreciate it, because I feel like I'm able to reach a lot of people with you. So thank you very much. So let's get down to it. I'm going to talk about just overall crime statistics for the Silver Spring district, but before I go over these numbers, let's talk about what's on everybody's minds, and that's the 3 recent shootings that I've had in downtown Silver Spring. Because of those shootings, there was a significant amount of rounds fired. That, a shooting in general is of concern, but the amount of rounds that were fired were concerning in all of these. The first shooting that I'd like to talk about was several weeks ago down on the DC line of Georgia Avenue. This was a shooting in the daytime hours on the weekend, and of concern to me was during the shooting, 3 businesses that were open for business, they actually were struck by these rounds. Now, thankfully, no good citizens were struck, but the businesses themselves were struck, and they were open for business. And this shooting was ripe for an innocent victim, and that draws great concern for me. There were 2 individuals that were struck by gunfire. They both fled into the District of Columbia. We are working with the District of Columbia, with the police department down there. The investigation is going very well. Everybody's been identified. We're working on why that shooting occurred. And I will tell you that the reason that happened in Montgomery County is because it just didn't happen in DC. It was just a matter of where that finally erupted. But those individuals lived in the District of Columbia, and it just so happens it spilled over right there on the line there. So the good thing is, although I can't share specifics, is we've made very good ground for the investigation. We're going to wrap things up with that. We're going to close things out with that, and get some individuals in custody. And I'm good with where that's going. Now let's turn our attention to this past weekend. Friday into Saturday night, we had a shooting with anywhere between 40 to 50 rounds that were fired down on Fenton Street in Thayer. This was multiple people. Individuals that were in somewhat of a shootout, and right now nobody was hit. Shockingly, we have a vehicle that's been recovered. We have a lot of shell casings that have been recovered, and we have some video that's been recovered, that we've recovered from different sources from the downtown area. What is disappointing is there's not a lot of people, witnesses or individuals that were around that say they saw anything. There's a real reluctance to provide any information to the police.
Wow.
So what it causes us to do is really rely on ballistics and science. And thankfully, we're really good at that. The problem with that, though, is it takes us a little bit of time because we have to submit all the evidence, all the gun casings or shell casings into evidence. And we work with the ATF and we do a lot of things with the ballistics. However, what we find is in time, that evidence is going to provide us with information. And what we find is that evidence is going to show us that these guns have been used in other counties and other jurisdictions around this metropolitan area. And a lot of times what happens is that those guns will be used in homicides or other incidents where there's an arrest made, and then we can come back and then in essence make an arrest for our incident. So it just takes a little bit of time. Now let's jump one more night ahead, Saturday into Sunday. We had another shooting with multiple rounds fired. Now we thought that it might have been something related. And we know now that the two incidents at the same basic location were not related at all. And we believe that the following night shooting was probably robbery related. Initially, the victim of that incident was not cooperating with police, but has since begun cooperating with us. We have video for that as well. We're working on enhancing that video, and I know that we're making some good progress with that case, and I hope to see, I believe you're actually going to see a news release from the police department before the week is out, looking for a little bit of help from the community for identification of a suspect. So we're working hard on making some identifications on those, and so more to come on that. But in both those incidents, the officers got down there very quickly and were able to lock down the scenes and preserve the peace, kind of keep things calmed down and collect up that evidence for future use. So let's start talking about overall crime for the Silver Spring District. I'd love to tell you that things are great. We do have some positive things to talk about, but we also have a little bit of negative. Unfortunately, when we're talking year to date from 2020 to 2021, our homicides have gone up. We're actually had one more homicide this year than we did last year. However, in one of our homicides up in our Ida sector, up in White Oak, one of our homicides was a double homicide. 2 people lost their lives. So we've had 7 this year, up 1 from 2020. Robberies are up slightly, and that's across the whole county. But in all of our sectors, in the George sector, down county, in White Oak area, and even up in our other areas, up our other sectors, we've seen increases in robberies. Burglaries, breaking into houses and stuff, we've seen a 5.9% decrease in our burglaries, and that's good to see. And we've also seen a reduction in larcenies by 13.5%, which is great. But motor vehicle thefts are up 13%, and that is also a jurisdictional trend, not only in Montgomery County, but also in the DMV. And we can talk more about that, but and as I've said a lot of times, I sound like a broken record, but more often than not, and probably over half of our stolen vehicles are a result of the keys being left in the vehicle and or the vehicle being running. Vehicles running at the time of the theft happens so much that now for our reporting purposes, we refer to them and we capture them as jump-in thefts. So that's how many we're having. So we can talk more about that on prevention efforts that we're asking for from the community. So a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. We have a lot of improvement to do, but as you will see from my 3 lieutenants, we've got some really good success stories, a lot of good arrests being made out there, and some good stuff going on. Before I turn it over to these 3 lieutenants, let's talk about some things that are really tough and affecting us. Staffing. We are still consistently seeing officers resign. I just had another officer resign this week. That is something that all 6 of our districts in Montgomery County are seeing. And we are not replenishing our officers at an acceptable rate. It's obviously far above my grade as the commander of the 3rd district, but we're trying to do things to attract officers to come to this county. But it is something that is highly affecting morale for the officers. It's just outright affecting the way that we do police work. You know, when a lot of times I get asked questions, how come you're not doing more community engagement? Well, it's very hard for me to do a lot of community engagement when we're holding calls for service at all times of day in and day out. So that's a real tough thing to deal with, but we're dealing with it. But it's going to be a long time before we get back up to an operating strength that's going to be at a level that's going to really help us do our jobs. And I know that the county council and I know that the executive are looking at ways to improve those things. I just hope that they're significant enough that they can make a difference. And so with that, I'll say one more thing. We are doing a lot of community engagement, specifically with downtown. And I'm not going to steal my first lieutenant that I'm going to introduce as Thunder, but we are doing a lot of downtown community engagement at Veterans Plaza. And we're also starting to do it out in the Piney Branch area. We're working with our recruitment section, but we're getting out in the community, we're engaging the community, and we're seeing some positive results there. One last thing I'll talk about, carjackings. That's always a hot topic that I get questions about. We've had 26 carjackings year to date. Of the 26 carjackings, 11 of those carjackings, we've made arrests. I would say exclusively, I'm almost 100% certain that of all the arrests, the offenders were residents of the District of Columbia. So the crime spillover from the District of Columbia still affects us greatly in downtown Silver Spring and actually Silver Spring in general. So it's something that we are dealing with. We have a really good working relationship with MPD, and quite often our cars are showing up down in DC, and DC's cars are showing up here in Montgomery County. So we will continue to work jurisdictionally on task force in efforts to knock down these types of crimes. So I guess, Alan, if you want me to ask if anybody has any general questions, or would you like me to turn it over to my lieutenants?
Why don't you turn it over to the lieutenants and see if people have questions after they complete their presentations?
Okay, all righty. So I'm not even so sure that all of these lieutenants have even met this group, but I know this guy is not. So this is my newest lieutenant. It's Lieutenant Dave Reed. I'm going to let him introduce himself and give a brief synopsis of where he's been on the department. He's been a great addition to my executive staff. He's been with me only for a few weeks here, and he's in the fire. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave Reed.
Thank you, Commander. I apologize. I'm in my car. I'm still out here working the streets. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, sounds good. First of all, just a little bit about me. I'm on the department for about 20 years. Did about 14 years in SWAT. I've been a part of our civil defense response team since I joined the department. I'm our honor guard commander. I've been an investigator with our PCAT unit. I've been a motor sergeant and was a part of coming up with the new the traffic division and the centralized traffic unit. Like I said, I promoted, only been here a few weeks, and working with Commander McBain for a long time now, and just really excited to be a part of this team. We have all a collective agreement of what needs to happen in 3D and Silver Spring, and we're working in partnership with the community. And that's why I'm a part of, I'm extremely honored to be a part of this group. I know I haven't met all of you, but I look forward to working with you. But just to start off, just a few things like Commander said, it's all about numbers and staffing with us. We continue to lose officers, but we see the officers coming into work, and we see the motivation in them. Yes, they are run ragged, but they're still coming in and they're still doing the job, and we're extremely proud of the efforts they're putting out on the road. We do a lot of community engagement with our community engagement team and our recruiting office. We go down to Veterans Plaza every other Wednesday, and it's a chance to meet the patrons, and we also have an opportunity to talk to potential candidates. And we talk to young men and women about joining the department and being a part of that change. And so that's been really good. Another thing that we're doing,
You can take it if you need. You can take
is
them if you need.
we're going to be starting a holiday task force starting next week. Again, it's about numbers, but everybody a part of this task force has volunteered. These are all officers that have volunteered to go down into the CBD and really to try to make a difference in what's going on. We're extremely proud of this fact, and we'll keep you all posted on what's going on. So the commander has covered a lot about what's going on in as far as bad down into the CBD. I want to kind of go over what's good. So one of the couple of things that I want to highlight some good arrests that was going on. On October 7th, we had a strong arm robbery of a citizen at Veterans Plaza. This unfortunately was a special needs adult victim. It was simply walking through Veterans Plaza when he was assaulted and robbed of his wallet and cell phone. Officers got the call. They were very quick to be on scene. A description was taken from not only the victim, but they started looking at surveillance videos. A lookout was placed, and officers stayed in the area, and a few hours later actually ended up catching the suspect and taking him into custody. So that was a great arrest. Another arrest on September 27th was a stolen vehicle with a loaded handgun. Multiple juveniles from DC were attempting to enter an Amazon delivery truck. Suspect descriptions and car information was passed on to the officers. Our CBD teams were right around the corner. They were very quick to be on the scene. They got the description of the vehicle. Actually, there was multiple officers that converged on the area, was able to stop the vehicle without incident before they could flee and take all the suspects into custody. And a gun was seized from a 9mm handgun was seized from inside the vehicle. So another great teamwork and another good arrest. One that you've probably heard about was the AT&T shooting. That was on September 17th. Suspect attempted to purchase a phone via fraud. Once he figured out that things weren't going to work out and the employee wasn't going to have it, he ended up he jumped the counter and trying to steal the phone. Then he ran out the business. The employees gave chase. He pulled out a 9mm handgun, turned around, and fired rounds at the employee. Thank God nobody was hit. Nobody was struck. A vehicle was struck, but this was in.
No,
You're on.
can they hear me? Please mute yourselves. Thank you.
Everybody, please mute your mics.
So Reed, you're muted. If you
Lieutenant
can,
Reed, you're muted.
Is
Thanks.
that better?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Did you hear about the AT&T shooting when I was going over there?
Yes,
Okay. So I just wanted to, I apologize if I'm in a bad spot and I'm coming in and out. But it was just another great example of officers being very close. And when the call went out, they converged on the area and ended up taking a armed suspect into custody without any incident at all, without anybody being hurt. So those are just three of the great examples of the officers, what they're doing down here. And we're continuing to work on our staffing problems and moving assets around in order to effectively serve the community. But that's what's going on down in the George sector.
Thank you, Dave. Alan, I'll just follow up with what Dave was talking about. He had touched on, as a result of the 3 shootings, we have, so even prior to this past weekend, we were putting together a holiday task force. We were going to start that task force in November, but because of this weekend, we've implemented it, and we're starting to put it into effect this weekend. It's getting ready to roll right now. So that's going to be a sergeant and 7 officers doing crime suppression in the central business district of downtown. We're also doing roving patrols of our parking garages downtown. And then we're also going to put up static positions, officers downtown that are just in static locations with high visibility to make the downtown region of the district inviting and safe. Now, understand this, that's a lot of resources downtown, but I've also moved different resources up into the other parts of my Ida and my Henry sector, and I haven't abandoned the other sectors. I've utilized some resources to make sure that I can do this adequately and prolonged. And my goal is to do this for the rest of October, November, December, and January, and then we'll reevaluate our efforts. So the downtown is where I'm really having a lot of problems, but I do not want to overlook some of the things up in my Ida sector in White Oak and also in my Henry sector in Hillendale and other regions, which we're going to talk about here as I introduce my next lieutenant. So I believe I'm going to bring on Lieutenant Lisa Engestrom. I don't think she's talked to this group, but she may have, but she actually oversees my Henry sector. So with that, I'll have Lisa introduce herself and tell us about what's going on in her sector.
Thank you, Commander. Everybody hear me all right? Good?
yes.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I have had the pleasure of talking to this group before. I see a lot of familiar faces, which is great, and I see a lot of new faces as well. So for those of you who I do not know yet, my name's Lisa Engestrom, and I have been in law enforcement for 21 years now. I've worked in patrol, I was in narcotics, I was an auto theft detective. I was also a recruiter and a background investigator for a period of time. And then as a supervisor, I worked in patrol again, and then had the pleasure of working in internal affairs for 2 years prior to my promotion to lieutenant, which was just this past May. So I actually started my career in Silver Spring as an officer. So I've kind of feel like I've come full circle back to my home base now as a lieutenant. So again, I'm really happy to be here and meet you all. So I have the Henry sector, and if you're not familiar, that is like Crest Haven, Oakview, Woodmore, Hillendale, Burnt Mills, Pawnee Branch, Long Branch, those areas. So I was looking through all of our stats, and I know the commander touched on this briefly, but for us, our biggest issue are these theft from autos. Time and time again, week after week, it's clearly the biggest issue that I see in all of our crime stats. And unfortunately, when I read through each of these cases, number one, every one of these cases has valuables left in the vehicle. So that's a number one thing that we can do to prevent these on, whatever we can do to help this. And then secondly, the majority of them, the vehicles are unlocked. So frequently this would be just people kind of walking by, they're trying door handles, things like that. So, they're going to go for the kind of lowest hanging fruit, that easiest access. So taking the valuables out of the car, locking the car, that really can prevent a great number of these. So another thing that we noticed, and I really want to highlight this because this was some really good, a really good eye. We have what's called a patrol investigative unit. So I have one detective who, he's kind of that middle ground. So we have a number of crimes that like a patrol officer would take a report for, and they would do the investigation. Then we have our more serious crimes like our shootings, burglaries, robberies. Those would be handled by our detective bureau. Well, there's kind of that middle ground where there's certain crimes that a patrol officer may not have a ton of time, especially when we're, we have our staffing challenges that we do. And this one detective kind of goes through all these reports every week and just tries to find patterns, tries to find leads that he can follow. And he noticed that over in our kind of Piney Branch, Long Branch corridor, over a 2-week period, we had 3 instances where women reported being kind of groped by someone and then they would run away. He identified that pattern, and he identified that the suspect was very similar, and the MO, the mode in which this occurred was very similar in all of these. And he has gone in and he may have actually found some video of this suspect. This is really an active case that's kind of just came together in the last few days. So he's pretty confident that the video, may yield a suspect in this case. So I just wanted to highlight that was some really good, just a really good eye from one of our detectives. Another thing that I want to highlight is we had a stolen vehicle that the operator happened to wreck that vehicle near New Hampshire Avenue, and he fled the scene of that wreck. He then tried to break into one house and then successfully broke into the neighbor's house. Thankfully, our units really got on scene of this quickly. They set up a tight perimeter, just really locked down this area. And with the help of our K9 unit, this person was apprehended. So for burglaries and for the initial stolen auto. So I'm just really happy that they were able to get there quickly and get this person into custody. And then I know a big issue, and I know we talked a little bit about this last time for some of you, was our speeding. For me, for my areas, I know that Hillendale area was a big one. The New Hampshire Avenue, kind of Powder Mill area corridors. And we've really tried to address that on a number of fronts. So first of all, we did some automation. We put out, maybe some of you that live near those neighborhoods may have seen that board that comes up that talks to you and says, slow down, or this is your speed, things like that. And we got some speed data out of that. And from that, we really try to narrow down the times because, we want to get the biggest bang for our buck, put our officers where they're needed at the time that they're needed. And we've identified that the times when this would be the most prevalent are that first thing in the morning, that 7 to 9. I'm guessing people are late for work. And as our traffic, of course, in our area is pretty difficult, that may be part of it. And then again from 3 to 8 p.m. And this is Monday through Friday that we noticed this. So what we've set up is a detail of patrol officers, 2 patrol officers that are going to be in that area from during these peak times to do. We're going to focus on LiDAR, which is like what you would all think of as laser, and just try to be visible and get some car stops, do some warnings, maybe do some citations depending on what they see. So that just started this week. We're hoping to continue that. And additionally, right now we have, I think we talked about this last time, but I'll just give this really briefly. We used to have a traffic unit, a motor unit in Silver Spring, where we had a sergeant and a number of officers who were completely designated to traffic. We did a reorganization of the department, and we now have the one traffic complaint officer in our district. And then we have what's called central traffic now. So that is 2 units that work days and evenings, and they kind of travel all around the county addressing traffic issues. We've reached out to them, and they are actually currently working traffic enforcement and high visibility in the New Hampshire Avenue corridor, coming down from like 29 to Powder Mill Road. So we're really hitting this at from several different angles, and hopefully we can make a difference with that. And then our traffic officer, we call him Coop, Officer Cupiolo. He's really tackling the neighborhoods. So those back streets, trying to be visible, looking for speeders, putting up again those sideboards where you may see them moved around the district a bit, just to put people on notice that we're here, and that that traffic is a concern for us. Also, I know that Lieutenant Reed mentioned this. We're doing some a corroboration with the recruitment division, putting up these kind of pop-ups with my community service officers. And next week, we're going to do one of these over in the Piney Branch area, up in those high rises. If you're familiar, if I have some people that live in those areas, like Forest Park Apartments, Nob Hill, those areas, we're going to have a pop-up kind of community event next Thursday, trying to get, when people come home, see a couple officers, kids can go near the playground and talk to an officer, maybe get a sticker or a badge or something like that. So just some visibility, and just a chance that if you want to come out, if you see one of these tables, wherever they may be, please come up and talk to our officers, not just the tables, but when you see our officers out there, it really goes a long way for them just to say hi, just to, thank them, or just acknowledge them. It really does make a difference. And while I'll take this quick opportunity, I don't want to be too long, I know, but Halloween is coming up. We're going to have events, I'm sure. We have tons of block parties planned, which I was really happy to see that you are all, a lot of your neighborhoods are doing the block parties. Whether it's your young kids or whether it's you putting on a costume, walking around to a block party, or a neighbor, just try to be bright, try to have, if you have lights, or your kids have flashlights or things like that. And traveling in groups can help, just with that visibility while you're out there. So with that, I'll take any questions, or, we could save that for the end. And I'll turn it back over to Commander McBain.
Thank you, Lisa. We're going to keep rolling here, and I do appreciate that. And so I'm just going to roll right into introducing my next lieutenant. This is Lieutenant Sunyoung Kim. She is overseeing, she does a lot of things down here in Silver Spring, but she oversees my IDA sector. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sunyoung.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be back and join you. So I'm going to try to be as brief as possible.
Privilege you want to assert, an immunity you want to assert, you got to come
Please
down.
mute yourselves, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. So when we talk about the IDA sector, that's the northern part of the district. So that's starts from like White Oak area and part of Fairland, Calverton, and goes all the way up to Howard County line. So this is the northern part of the district. And in the IDA sector, we do have a number of things that are going on, and just talking about September and October timeframe, so to keep it current, we've had incidents of multiple burglaries, commercial burglaries that detectives are actively working on. There was a residential burglary that officers were actually able to converge. There was 2 residential burglaries where Officers were very in the nearby area and were able to make an arrest on the arrest of the individual. And in both incidents, one incident, the victim was threatened, and then another incident, victim was pepper sprayed, but luckily no serious injuries, and the suspects were apprehended immediately. And then we also have couple robberies that occurred in this recent 2 months. And in a White Oak Shopping Center, there was a strong arm robbery of an individual, and officers again were able to get into the area very quickly. They fled, officers gave chase, and was able to arrest one of the 4 suspects immediately on the scene, which allowed our detectives to conduct investigation, and 2 additional suspects were arrested recently. And then we talk about proactive policing. And again, our officer was on a proactive policing and running tags. Commander talked about, as well as my counterparts talked about, a lot of the stolen vehicles, carjacking. So officers are actively running tags in the hopes of finding more criminal activity, and behold, they find a stolen vehicle tag, a stolen vehicle, and they are able to, they're trying to make a traffic stop. Unfortunately, like a lot of our criminals, safely. For the safety of the community, the pursuit was terminated shortly thereafter. However, we did recover a handgun from that incident. So it just goes to show again the amount of danger that our officers are in. However, they're still actively patrolling and trying to do their part to reduce crime in the neighborhood. There was also there was a stabbing incident in White Oak area in October. Officers arrived on scene and was able to render immediate first aid and save the individual's life in this incident as well. And also on top of that, they found the suspect and gave chase and was able to apprehend one of the suspects, and our detectives have a very good lead on the other suspects as well. So those are some of the highlights of the incidents. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more officers respond to a rollover accident, and again they respond quickly in the hopes of rendering aid because it's a serious car accident, except that the driver flees because he threw a handgun and multiple drugs away, and as he was fleeing. Again, officers just being due diligence, staying in the area. About 2 hours later, they were able to identify the suspect and also apprehend the suspect and connect him to the firearm as well. So our other problems that, as Lieutenant Engestrom talked about, theft from auto is a concern. Ours is catalytic converters. Unfortunately, downtown Silver Spring is also having this similar issues, but up in our IDA sector, we have a catalytic converter theft going on right now. Unfortunately, that's not something that it's hard to prevent. It's oftentimes the criminals are going under the vehicles and cutting catalytic converters and rendering the vehicle damaged and will require repairs. There are a couple of different commercial options available. Unfortunately, none of it is foolproof. Like, suspects can still steal and cut and damage vehicles to steal the catalytic converters. So that is something that is on our radar. It's also not unique to just our area. It is a regional issue that is affecting multiple counties and other jurisdictions as well. So our detectives are trying to work on this. As Lieutenant Engstrom talked about, it falls on our one detective, unfortunately, with our patrol investigative unit. So that is a challenge. It's also because with the catalytic converters, it's difficult to trace. There's no identifier, there's no serial number. Those are some of the challenges that we have. We've had multiple events, community engagement events in the area, and we're planning for a couple National Night Out in White Oak. It was a huge success, one of the bigger events that we've had in the area. And we've also had at the Enclave, very similar night out as well. So we have a couple more also planned in the future. I will also take any questions together with everybody else.
Thank you, Sunyoung. Hey, Alan, I've been trying to look at a lot of the comments. I've been, some I think I've been answering to the whole group, and some I've been going right back to the people. I rarely do that, but I've been trying to knock down some questions. But there's been a couple questions that are reoccurring that I want to just address real quick. As far as downtown is concerned, there's some questions about these hookah bars and some of these places staying open all night long into the early morning hours, like almost like a 24-hour establishment. I believe the answer is yes, they can. And the easy way to explain that is the Tasty Diner. It stays open. And I think that those places said, well, if the Tasty Diner can, then we should be able to. Now, the rules that start to come into play is, but they can't serve alcohol. And that's where we start seeing violations and we start seeing the bad conduct. So I'm working with permitting right now. I'm working on establishment checks through the Department of Liquor Board Control, and we're working on ways to keep track of what they're doing for the places that that are staying open at all hours of the day and night. And not to mention, if they are going to stay open, well, the Tasty Diner doesn't have pounding music going at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. So there's got to be some rules in place that allow, if they are going to stay open, that they're going that they're going to have a they're going to make it so that the community that surrounds their establishment is going to be able to sleep in peace, right? So I'm working on things like that. I'm also working on an overall kind of team approach with the fire marshal's office, the Department of Liquor Board Control, permitting, the EPA, and we're gonna focus on these bars and nightclubs and establishments, keeping the noise down, staying within the guidelines that they're permitted to stay in, and kind of keeping some checks on them, checks and balances on them to make sure that they're complying. And quite frankly, without saying names, some of these establishments are, I think, a time that we're seeing in downtown Silver Spring. So we're looking at that as part of the issues that we're dealing with as well. Just to clarify on the shootings, they were not gang related. I'm 100% good on that. They were not gang related. Gangs have evolved differently. There are gangs, but we're not seeing the gang activity that we saw several years ago. But, we have these little cliques of, maybe by definition, a few guys get together and they meet it by definition, but we have beefs, right? We have guys that just have a problem with another group of guys, but those shootings were not gang related. And I just wanted to clarify that as well. And I think I answered everybody else's questions. There was a question about the reimagination, that it does, somebody had asked that the reimagination task force was calling for, reducing the number of police officers working in Silver Spring, and asked for my opinion. My opinion is, think about that. It would not be good, right? And I can't answer the calls for service with what I have now. If you were going to reduce it by 50%, I can only imagine the chaos it would just be chaos. So I think I've answered everything. I'm going to still continue to knock down these questions while you continue. And if people have questions, have at it, and my lieutenants and I will answer them.
Thank you very much, Commander McBain. we like to engage our audience with MCPD. First, I'd like to welcome to this conversation two of our board members who joined late, Eric Hensel and Karen Matson. Thank you for joining us. And we also have as a guest the Deputy State Attorney from Prince George's County, Perry Paler. Mr. Paler, welcome. So we want to take questions, and some of you have lots of experience with these Zoom conversations. If you can raise your hand, by clicking the reaction button in the lower right-hand side of the screen, and then there's something that says raise hand. So we'll try to see if that works. Otherwise, you can just wave your hand wildly and we'll call on you. So if anybody has any questions that have not been addressed by the commander and the lieutenants during their presentations, please ask them now. I always have a bunch in my pocket, so you really don't want me to go through my list. Please ask some questions. And I'm proud to say that almost every member of our board is present this evening. One of the questions that Lisa mentioned in her presentation, talking about Long Branch and the community engagement, made me think about this. Do you have enough officers who have foreign language ability? And does the lack of officers with foreign language ability, Amharic, Spanish, Vietnamese, does that make it more difficult for you to do your work? So that's for you, Lisa.
Sure. We actually have quite a few officers, especially in our area, that do speak Spanish fluently, among other languages. And every officer that is, certified to speak a language, that information is available to our dispatchers. That information is available to us. And pretty frequently you'll hear on the air, if someone is having a communication issue, they'll just get on the air and say, hey, can I have see if there's a Vietnamese speaking officer. Oftentimes that can be addressed very quickly by an officer. We also have a service called the language line that we can call into and get pretty much any language that we need on that language line service. Because obviously being able to communicate quickly is of the utmost importance. So now all of our officers have cell phones. So they would, without having to worry about the cell phone issue, if they couldn't find an officer, they could quickly use the language to be able to communicate.
Thank you. I've got a question for Commander McBain, and that has to do with the idea from the county council and the county executive that they wanted to have more mental health professionals in the field. And I wonder how that's being implemented, if at all, and if you think it'll really make a difference in your work.
Yeah. It's a huge, huge topic that I've been working with. So it's a big issue that the council and the county executive and we've been working on. But the reality is, Silver Spring is ground zero for mental health and also the homeless population. And the reason I say that is that homelessness and mental health is so intertwined, and it is something we deal with all day long, from sun up to sundown. And I appreciate what the county's trying to do with their mental health approach. However, I think all would agree it needs to expand greatly. If the idea is to reimagine this to kind of remove police a little bit from it, because even police would agree that there's some of these instances where we don't need to be a part of this, right? The police would very much agree with you on that. But right now, we have to be involved in all of it because there's nothing set in place where we can step back. Now, there are situations that are just so violent that we have to take care of it, right? But we often get calls for service where a citizen sees somebody in the community and they're simply just concerned with their well-being. They're talking to themselves, or, you know, kind of like standing in traffic or doing something that's just odd. Well, we get those calls. Can you check their welfare? Well, quite frankly, sometimes a uniform presence sometimes ramps that person up. So if we could have a health worker, a mental health worker from the crisis center approach and deal with that individual and handle it, then we can go ahead and handle violent crime and other issues while, you know, Health and Human Services deals with it. So we are very much in favor for a more robust plan to deal with mental health. We want to work with HHS, and you know, I hope that the plan is that we can, you know, form teams, work together to deal with these issues, because it is huge in downtown Silver Spring. We are ground zero for it. So I'm really hoping we see some good things. In fact, I'm meeting pretty regularly with HHS and other, you know, stakeholders about these very issues as we kind of move forward to bring up these plans.
Thank you very much. I see that Gina Smith has raised her hand. Gina, do you have a question for MCPD?
I do. First of all, let me thank you for having this forum. And I am a resident of Block 24. We are located at the Fenton Bonaparte corridor, and 3 of our units have been subjected to the entry of stray bullets due to discharging of gunfire within the last 60 days. And that's terrifying for our residents, for myself and for my neighbors. And so I would like to know what increased stepped up presence, police presence is going to be implemented on the Bonaparte Benton corridor. And then I'd like to know what dialogue is occurring between some of these establishments and the police department to ensure that any patrons who are coming to these establishments are being screened for carrying concealed firearms to ensure safety and protect the citizens.
Yeah, so we do not work with the businesses, the bars down there. We can't even participate in any type of like bouncer like you see in DC. So you won't see Montgomery County law enforcement participating in anything like that. If the businesses themselves choose to do that, that's on them. Where we do, I don't know if you jumped on late, but we were talking about, we're working with permitting with Fire Marshal's office. We're working with other departments in the county to tighten up a little bit on these establishments for these violations, whether it be alcohol related, whether it be drugs being used in the clubs, over service after hours, but more specifically for law enforcement, the things that we're doing is I have blasted a ton of resources downtown, specifically all nights of the week, but specifically on Friday and Saturday nights. But what I've recognized is there are certain parking garages downtown that harbor a lot of the activity after these bars start dumping out. And so when we see these bars pushing people out, that's when I have static positions set up. That's when I have these roving patrols that are coming in the area. And the goal is to have such a high visibility downtown that they just move on and get out. I recognize the shootings that you're talking about, or the rounds that are going into the loft. And I've been dealing with a number of people who've made that very clear to me. But those are the efforts that I've done, that will continue to do all the way through to February, and then we're going to reevaluate our efforts. It really becomes high visibility and just sustained saturated enforcement. And that's what's going to get this criminal element out.
Thank you,
I
Commissioner.
mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. So we'd like to see the saturation, during the week, on the weekends, whatever you can do to increase the presence here, because I think it's been clearly identified as an area that requires this saturation in terms of police presence based on these incidents.
I think we also need to really start taking a look at multiple violations of some of these alcohol violations. When an establishment violates permitting violations, that maybe they lose their permits. They lose an alcohol permit, it makes no sense to be open anymore. And I believe that some of these establishments are root cause for a lot of the violence downtown. And quite frankly, I could stand to lose a few of them. And I know that that's not good for business, but that's not my problem. My problem is crime. So I feel you, and I'm going to work on that.
Thank you, Commander McBain. Karen Matson's got a question.
Karen, you're on mute.
You're-
Thank you. Thank you for participating in this forum this evening. It's very helpful. I find myself feeling concerned for the first time in many years, many years, about going to downtown Silver Spring in the evening, hearing about this activity lately. And so I'm just wondering what advice that you have for residents who still want to go and enjoy downtown Silver Spring without worrying about crime.
Yeah, so actually one of my officers had put together a PowerPoint to speak to businesses just about things like that. And one of her slides said, don't assume everything's rainbows, right? And everything's just hunky-dory. I'm not saying that you assume that it's all violence, right? But you have an awareness about yourself. Be vigilant about yourself, not necessarily in your phone, but kind of aware of what's going on around you. And just kind of some old school techniques, keep your handbag, strapped close around you, stay in groups or in pairs, stay in well-lit areas and things like that. And, again, I'm putting a lot of resources down there. Silver Spring is still a safe place to be. And so the real thing is just be aware of your surroundings. Don't make yourself a victim. I think that's a huge part of this. Don't assume that, there's going to be a cop on every corner. Take a little bit of ownership of just keeping yourself safe, knowing that we are there.
Eric,
Does that make sense?
It does. I know you're reluctant to go into this, but I mean, are there any particular areas we should avoid? Are there certain times of day that we should be more mindful?
That's really on you. I mean, there's a lot of great places downtown Silver Spring. I really can't tell you what's good, what's bad. What's comfortable for you might be different for somebody else. I think you have to go into your comfort zone and just be smart.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Eric Cathcart.
Commander, it's nice to put a face to a voice. You gave me a call a little while ago. I'm a president of North Hills and Sligo Creek. We had a little problem, and you picked up the phone and we talked, and I really appreciate that touch.
Appreciate it.
And thank you. One of the things that really struck me when you started to talk earlier is the issue of morale. Can you drill down into that a little bit more to help me help us understand? Are there patterns that you're seeing? Is it the cost of living or lack of pay to work in Montgomery County, or is it the pressure to get vaccinated, or is it or can you help us understand how we can help you with a morale problem?
This is tough, right? I want to make it perfectly clear. I am not attacking the executive and I'm not attacking the county council. I'm being a realist. I am the commander of 159 cops that come to work every single day. Montgomery County is no different than many other jurisdictions across this whole country, right? In the last couple years, first, just like everyone else, we get hit with COVID, right? And right out of the gate, we have to do our jobs differently. We really kind of stopped doing traffic stops because, not only do we not want to get exposed, but we really don't want to expose the public, right? So we kind of like, everything's kind of taboo and our life gets turned upside down. And then George Floyd happens and overnight, law enforcement changes dramatically. Governments all over this country, they make decisions on where they're going to go with certain policies and laws and direction of their agencies. And there's decisions made. The rhetoric towards police, whether you agree with it or not, it was raw, right? And officers were put under a ton of stress. And the reality was, man, I'm just going to shut down because I don't want to lose my job. I want to go home at night. More importantly, I don't want to lose my pension and my job, and I got a family to take care of. And there was just so much pressure, right? I'm not here to defend, the reality is, and I don't want to, keep digging this up. This isn't we're not defending what happened to George Floyd, but here we're trying to do our job. We're trying to navigate how we do policing now, right? This reimagination. What is that, right? Because we're talking about mental health, right? Where we were told that all this mental health stuff was going to come. We're going to get police out of it. We're no good for mental health. And we're like, you're right. We're great with that. We're ready to come out of that. But guess what? My officers have conducted over 400 emergency petitions just in Silver Spring this year, right? Well, clearly we're not out of mental health. So my officers, they're told, man, we hate you in mental health. You're no good for mental health. But yet we keep running the EAPs. We keep running the guy that's trying to kill himself. That we keep running these calls. So these guys and gals are trying to figure out how to do the job. The reality is, for Montgomery County, we are the second worst paid police department in the state of Maryland. We used to be the top. We live in the richest county in the state of Maryland. A large number of officers have just left the county because we can't afford to live here. And our recruitment efforts, although we're spending an amazing amount of money and effort at recruitment, we we are not recruiting anybody. Nobody wants to come work in Montgomery County. Other police departments in the state of Maryland are offering more money, better benefits, better retirement, signing bonuses, you name it. You know, the rhetoric towards police is not as bad. I mean, there's just a lot of things, but you know, it's just the overall stress that these guys are dealing with. And you know, they still don't know what it is that the community wants, right? And we ask them to keep going out there and locking people up. You know, do you want pretextual stops or do you not? You know, pretextual stops lock up a lot of people. Like everybody hears they want violent crime stopped, right? But we don't want traffic stops. Well, how do you get that? I mean, you know, like it's just so many conflicting stories associated with police work, and there's just no real connection with and solution. So, you know, I'm not attacking anybody, but these are realities. You're looking at the biggest cheerleader, me and these three lieutenants. I mean, we go into roll calls and we build these guys up and we simply get them through another 10 hours of work, right? They're scared to death, right? Because they're scared to death that they're going to take action, not necessarily even to take a life, that they're going to take action that somebody's not going to like. And all of a sudden, they're going to either be indicted or fired. And they got a family to take care of. They got a mortgage to pay. And it's just like, holy cow, it's a lot of stress. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know if anybody knows on this call, but it seemed to be a big win for me. But the United States Supreme Court just ruled on qualified immunity. And that was a win for law enforcement. And for those who don't know about qualified immunity, you know, if an officer is acting in good faith and makes a mistake, he can't be sued, you know, civilly. And that's a win, because there's some jurisdictions, and there's been a lot of talk in a lot of government circles that an officer should be, you know, be open to civil liability for his or her actions. And, you know, personally, boy, if that one ever hit, you'd never see a cop in this country. So that's my opinion. But anyway, when things like that is being thrown around, these guys are just scared, you know. And I will say this though, and what I tell these guys all the time, and I sent out an email the other day. A lot of people support them. And there's a lot of good people out here that really like them. And I think there's a very small number of haters. And I really think that I think we're on a turn, you know, and I try to tell these guys, just hang in there. So, you know, to answer your final part of your question, you know, look, everybody on this call, they might not be, you know, lovers of the department, right? But you know, if you like the department, you see a cop, just say hi to them. They, you know, some people say some pretty raw things to my cops. And so don't be afraid to say hello. In fact, they might give you a crazy look because they're like, what? You know, but I encourage my guys to have a frank conversation with the community, because, you know, just be able to talk to somebody normally about something other than taking a complaint sometimes is a little relieving during the day. But there's a lot of stress that's associated with everything that they do. And you know, I know I probably didn't fully answer it in that couple minutes, but that's a lot that's out there.
It was a big question, and thank you so much for sharing that.
Yep.
I mean, it helps us. We're looking at the other side of the coin, and let's get real. The police officers are people too, and it's also election season. So, you know, thank you for sharing that little factoid that you guys that were, you know, we can't attract officers because we can't pay them to keep them around here. So again, it's election season, folks, and thank you so
Yep.
much.
Yeah, and listen, I'll tell you that I know that the council and I know that the executive are talking about this, and they recognize it as being an issue. And I think that I think it's very much on the front of their to-do list. I hope so, and I hope to see good things with that.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
you got my support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Commander McBain. Let's go to 9 o'clock, 15 more minutes. If you've got questions, please raise your hand or wave your hand wildly so we can see you. Commander, when you were making your presentation, along with your deputies, I don't remember hearing very much about pot smoking and pot dealing. I wonder how that figures into your work program.
You guys are getting a little hard, making my day a little harder as we go on. Marijuana is a very tough topic to talk about in Montgomery County because let me think about this for a second. It's very much liked in this county by a lot of people who have influence. I believe that I believe the state of Maryland is going to legalize marijuana anyhow, probably this year. The question that I have is the rank smell, and does someone have to sit next to somebody and while having dinner and have to tolerate that smell, right? What I also recognize is, I don't believe that somebody should go to prison or go to jail for the possession of marijuana. However, marijuana in Montgomery County or state of Maryland is a civil citation, right? It's it's $100 ticket. Where we usually have problems is if we do stop somebody for the possession of marijuana, a civil violation, they have a responsibility to provide us their name. And if they don't give us our name, it then evolves into a criminal violation. Then we sometimes see a resistance or an assault and battery, and it kind of unravels. And that's where you see arrests for criminal violations happen. So then they say, oh, you arrested the individual for possession of marijuana. And we said, no. We did not arrest them for marijuana. We arrested them for assault and battery, resisting arrest, and failing to give the name. Marijuana is a really weird topic for Montgomery County, especially. And I think it should be treated like alcohol. We have places where it's acceptable to drink alcohol by people of certain ages. The idea that anybody, Veterans Plaza is ground zero for that, right? Veterans Plaza was designed to be a family-friendly community area that was just supposed to be a place where people could go and enjoy places and a venue to just hang out. And at times it is overrun by pot smokers, and it forces me to send my officers in and to deal with it. And it doesn't always go well. And so I continue to look for ways to address those issues. And it's a really tough thing to deal with because, listen, I can chase down and lock up heroin, pill pushers, meth heads, all that all day long. Nobody will ever question me for that. But man, the minute we grab on to somebody smoking pot, boy, everybody loses their mind. It's a tough one to deal with.
I knew it was a tough question for you. So you, one of the interesting questions that pops up almost every time we have these conversations is, do you think that there should be a new MCPD precinct in downtown Silver Spring? Should there be a police district?
So, you know, it's government, so this could change tomorrow. But, you know, I don't know if people realize this, but I house two of my central business district teams in fire station number 1, right down in downtown Silver Spring. And I also have spaces available for officers that work in that George sector to take breaks or kind of hang out there. Now, the plan is in fiscal 23 is I'm actually going to move in 4 police services aides, basically secretaries that will work the 6 to 4 shift and the 3 to 1 shift. And so we will open up a partial district there. We won't have a midnight shift, but so citizens will be able to walk in off the street and say, either file a report or ask for an officer to respond, or any services that you would get, register a bicycle or anything, like get fingerprinted, things like that. So that's slated to occur, and there's a little bit of infrastructure that needs to get done, but it's very light lifting as far as infrastructure is concerned. So that is the goal moving forward into the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Commander. Perry Paler, you have a question?
Yeah, briefly. Good evening, Commander McBain. Yeah, I have a question. Really, it's 2 parts. How many drug recognition experts would you say are on the force? And then second part of that is, what do you see the impact of legalization of marijuana and the need for additional DREs on the force?
So we have a very robust DRE program. I don't have the exact number, but it's pretty much, it rivals PG. I mean, PG and us are pretty robust. I would say to you that you need to double the program. But more importantly, Montgomery County, and I don't want to go too deep in because of time, but we are the first agency in the state to do a cannabis impaired driving training. And so we've begun training, and actually Prince George's County, their DREs help us with the training. And so do other DREs throughout the state. But we're teaching our cops how to identify cannabis impaired drivers because it is that prevalent. So that is going to be the key. That's going to be where we need to go, because if you look at the studies coming out of Colorado, the year after they legalized marijuana, they saw a 17% increase in pedestrian fatalities, and they saw overall fatalities with vehicles go up dramatically. That's going to happen here. It's going to happen. And people say no, but it's going to happen. And something else that I will turn my opinion on. If you think that black market marijuana is going to go away, you're sadly mistaken. It's just not. Your neighborhoods down here are going to still have a very robust black market marijuana sales operation, and you're going to see violence associated with that.
You all had a driving by under the influence of marijuana case go forward in the district court in Montgomery County?
We have not had one specifically associated with the cannabis and drive based on that, but we've had with DREs. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
And as we're coming to the end of our meeting, maybe Commander McBain, you can just reiterate what we as residents can do to help your guys do a better job policing.
Well, obviously support is the best. Listen, if I noticed that there's a number of council representatives out on the call. Speak your mind to them, right? They they can be allies. And I think it's important. I think sometimes people just think somebody else is speaking for the greater good, right? So just, I feel like you need to speak your mind of what you think's important. But as far as the police department, I can't stress enough. And from the very minute I took over down here, I encourage people, approach my cops, say hello. It's refreshing to them, engagement conversations, ask them some questions. Hey, and obviously, if something doesn't look right to you, don't feel that it's putting us out to call and report something. If something doesn't look right, come to a police station, file a report, or grab an officer on the street and point it out to them. But we're here to serve you guys. I really mean this. I'm very much aware of what's going on in the district, especially downtown. You are going to see some huge presence down there. And look, people generally have my email, and everybody knows Alan on the call. If something is of a concern to you, feel free to reach out to me and make sure that I'm aware of it. At least give me a shot to try to knock it down.
Thank you, Mr. Commander McBain. Karen Matson, you have a final question?
Not a question, just a comment. Not only did have I spoken to your cops a lot, I used to teach a whole group of them yoga classes every week.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know if they're still doing that. I was
They
told
are
that
Thursdays.
Awesome. I was told that they were still doing it after I left them. So that's wonderful.
Yep. Thank
In
you.
the conference room, right? That we turned the conference room into a yoga studio.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Awesome. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
Well, let's bring the meeting to a close. On behalf of the Board of Safe Silver Spring, want to thank Commander McBain and his deputies for joining us this evening. Safe Silver Spring does these quarterly meetings with MCPD 4 times a year. So stay tuned for the next one. This one will be available on YouTube and also on Facebook. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Karen.